first debate this afternoon, Reform of the Child Support Agency, Nicky Morgan.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr Weir, and it's a pleasure to be speaking in this chamber this afternoon with you in the chair. I'm not quite sure if we're setting a record here, but I'm calculating that we're numbering women to men about 5 to 1 at the moment, so I think that's an extremely good sign on an afternoon when Parliament is debating sitting hours too. This afternoon's debate is about the reform of the Child Support Agency. When I was elected, I expected to get a number of cases relating to welfare benefits, the UK Border Agency, or organisations such as HMRC. What I did not expect was that one of my largest and most enduring caseloads would relate to the Child Support Agency. In just over 2 years, my constituency office has dealt with 70 individual cases where something has gone wrong, and I am just one Member of Parliament. In the borough of Charnwood alone, as at December 2011, the CSA had a live caseload of almost 2,600 cases. Before I get into the detail of some of those cases, I thought it would be helpful if we first consider why the Child Support Agency was set up in the first place. Back in 1993, when John Major's government introduced the Child Support Agency, the aim was for it to pursue parents who failed to support their children financially. Savings were expected to be made as parents claiming benefits from the state would instead find their income supplemented by a maintenance arrangement paid by the non-resident parent. I support this intention, but as I intend to show in this debate, it is clear to me, and I'm sure other honourable members, that the system is not working and must be reformed, as children, through no fault of their own, are not getting the financial support they need or deserve. Despite an often heavy-handed approach and costs of £440 million every year, half of children living in separated families in this country have no financial maintenance support in place. The Child Support Agency alone is expensive to run, with 40 pence needed to be spent in order to collect each pound. These costs are often as a result of the Child Maintenance and Enforcement Commission running 2 separate failing IT systems and an additional 100,000 clerical, that is paper cases, the system cannot cope with. Recent Child Maintenance and Enforcement Commission statistics showed that 48% of complaints were from non-resident parents and 50% of complaints were from parents with care. So I think it's clear that no one is happy with the current system. Child Support Agency data also shows that more than 5,000 past and current CSA cases remain with over £50,000 in arrears. I should say at this point that I would like to congratulate, however, CMEC on producing an excellent set of statistics. I think they must be congratulated for the transparency with which they do produce their figures, and I think that's a model for many other non-departmental public bodies or other arms of government to follow. But despite these statistics, there has been some progress, with deduction orders where money is removed directly from debtors' accounts having trebled since 2009. What we therefore need is a system that is simple and flexible and supports families to make and stick to their own arrangements, if that is at all possible. A system that steers families through a tough time, keeping negotiations constructive and preventing a difficult family breakup becoming worse or potentially destructive. The problem with the current system, from my perspective, is that it seems to invite conflict, often being accused of being heavy-handed and far too arbitrary. The evidence shows that the most effective and enduring arrangements are ones that parents come to themselves. Secondly, the CSA doesn't offer value for money. And thirdly, enforcement can be ineffective, with huge arrears totaling nearly £4 billion as at March this year. And there is a specific issue, which I suspect I'm going to speak about and other honourable members might do too, relating to self-employed partners paying child maintenance. Of course.
Mark Spencer.
I'm very grateful to the Honourable Lady, and I congratulate her on securing this debate. I just wonder if she recognises that the system at the moment seems to penalise those dads who, and absent parents, who want to do the right thing and want to contribute to their children's welfare, but those who simply want to try and avoid the system, the CSA seems to not have the power to grab hold of them and make them contribute towards their children's lives.
I thank my honourable friend very much indeed for his point, and I think he's absolutely right. And I'm going to give a couple of individual constituency cases where the parent without care, the non-resident parent, is trying, usually fathers, trying to do the right thing, perhaps by looking after children on 1 or 2 days a week, but that's not recognised. Whereas other people seem to be able to play the system, and that's certainly something that we have found in my constituency office. However, this afternoon I wanted to bring very much a human element to this, because numbers and statistics are all very well, but what I, and I'm sure other honourable members, including the Minister, see in our constituency casework is the negative effect that the CSA is having on people's lives, and particularly children. I don't expect the Minister to comment on individual cases I'm about to raise. She has already been good enough to see me twice with her officials to discuss two very difficult cases, but I do feel that I owe it to my constituents, who often come to see me and my caseworkers in a state of some distress, to talk about some of the cases that we have seen. Let's start with poor enforcement. Karen Hollis is the mother of 4 children. All have the same father, who is self-employed and was using the accounting system to tell the CSA that he doesn't earn enough to pay her anything, but the bare minimum of £5 per week. £5 for 4 children. Miss Hollis gathered evidence to show that his lifestyle could not possibly match what he was saying about his finances. But the CSA didn't take her evidence, or if they did, they then lost it on several occasions, when she sent it in. Miss Hollis asked for our help with putting her evidence to the CSA, and that has now resulted in an assessment of £50 per week. That's 10 times the amount that she was originally assessed as getting. Why is it that ex-partners often have to turn into detectives to get a fairer assessment? My second case relates to Tracy Warren. Her case is currently with the adjudicator, who is carrying out a formal investigation. Miss Warren told the CSA 18 months before her ex-husband left the country that he was planning to go, and she kept telling them, but nothing was done to get him to pay before he went. He has now moved to the Middle East, and because Britain does not have a reciprocal arrangement with the country in question, the CSA cannot chase him to pay. The same issue has arisen in another case, where in that case it is the mother who has moved to China. Moving on to cases where paternity is an issue. I've had 2 cases where the father queried the paternity of the child, and as a result, the whole CSA claims process seemed to grind to a halt. Whether this is a delaying tactic or not, I could not say. I do know that in one case, after a father asked for a DNA test, he then heard nothing further from the CSA for 3 years, at which point they contacted him to say he was £16,000 in arrears. Surely an efficient and effective system should not allow such long periods of silence to occur. Paternity should be swiftly established in order to allow the CSA system to proceed, or for the CSA to cease involvement if paternity is not proven. On the issue of arrears being allowed to accrue without the CSA appearing to notice, I would also mention the case of Mr. B in my constituency. Mr. B had a deduction of earnings order so that maintenance was deducted from his salary every month. Unfortunately, the employer failed to pay that amount onto the CSA, and the CSA failed to notice. When the employer went into administration, my constituent, Mr. B, was told by the CSA that he would have to pay the outstanding amounts all over again, although he did eventually recover a percentage of the debt as part of the administration process. But what I can't understand is why would the CSA fail to spot that it wasn't receiving the money in the first place from the employer? As I will mention a bit further, a whole element of flexibility is needed in the system. My constituent, Christine Barrell, is claiming maintenance from her husband, who is self-employed. He has been nil assessed, which Mrs. Barrell is challenging. Her husband's business accounts, which will support her appeal, are not due until the end of the year, but the CSA need her appeal within the next 28 days. Can this period be extended to reflect the particulars of this case? And finally, I'd like to highlight those cases which I've already mentioned, thanks to the intervention of my honourable friend from Sherwood, where the non-resident parent is trying to do the right thing and maintain contact with their children by seeing them regularly. And therefore they're often feeding them and clothing them, as well as incurring transport costs in order to see them and to take them back to the parent with care. But these costs aren't being reflected in the maintenance calculation, and the parent with care will not agree to the calculation being adjusted to help to meet those costs. In one case, the CSA did recommend that the parent with care should share the child benefit they are receiving, but this was met with a flat refusal. So, as I hope I've shown, we have a system which no one seems to be satisfied with. And where do we go from here? Well, in a recent survey carried out for CMEC, 2/3 of parents with a family-based arrangement said they were happy with their situation. Only a third of CSA families said they felt the same. Almost 90% of non-resident parents complied with their own arrangements, compared with just under 2/3 of those who had payments assessed and enforced by the CSA. Most parents with family-based arrangements considered those to be fair, compared to only 42% whose payments were calculated and enforced by a state system. Over 50% of parents using the CSA say they could make their own arrangements if only they had the right help and support. I welcome the government's proposed collaborative approach, which means separated parents should hopefully be able to avoid the conflict that often comes with CSA involvement by making their own family-based maintenance arrangements whenever possible. The government has, I understand, already committed £20 million for developing better coordinated local support services to help them do that. This money will be used to work with voluntary and community groups to make it easier for parents to navigate existing support and to look at what additional help is needed. There has been criticism of the charges which are to be introduced to allow people to access the statutory system. I understand it was the previous government which took through Parliament a wide-ranging power to charge all parents as part of the Child Maintenance and Other Payments Act 2008. The Coalition is building on both this legislation and Sir David Henshaw's report to the last government on the CSA by implementing these charging proposals. And I also understand there will be heavy discounts for the lowest incomes and total exemption where domestic violence has occurred. Could the Minister say more in her speech about these charging proposals? Who will be affected? How will they work? And when will they be introduced? Could she also address an issue raised with me by Gingerbread, which is what will happen in the treatment of new and existing cases when the new system comes into force? For example, parents who separate after the new system is in force will, we hope, be signposted to a range of support services and encouraged to make a private arrangement. What about parents already caught up in the system? For example, if they have a deduction of earnings order in place, what happens to that when the new system comes into force? In conclusion, Mr. Chairman, I hope I have shown that the current statutory child support system needs speedy reform. I do appreciate that it is very difficult for any government system to cope with the complexities of family life. Parenting for both mothers and fathers is hard enough without having to make allowances for access arrangements, work pressures and new relationships, which mean that every situation is unique, and that is why any child support system is, perhaps a necessity, going to be a fairly blunt instrument. Yes, of course I will.
Jessica Morden.
She's made a powerful case, and I think we'd all agree there do need to be changes to the CSA. But does she feel that it's important that the new system works smoothly immediately, which is something which has foxed all previous governments, in fairness, because at a time of kind of cuts and rising costs of living, it's really important that child maintenance really matters to families, and we mustn't risk making things even worse by getting things wrong and making it even more difficult for families on the breadline at the moment.
Nicky Morgan.
I think I'm very much indeed. I think she might have read my last sentence of my speech, because she's absolutely right. I mean, at the end of the day, I think it would be interesting to hear speeches from all sides of the House, but I think probably we all want to get to the same place, which is those families who cannot make arrangements actually have help in order to make those arrangements, and children get the money that they need in order to have all the essentials that they need in life, and that families get the support that they need. And so she's absolutely right that any transition, I'm sure the Minister will address this, any transition has to be as smooth as these things possibly can be. And we are talking about IT systems and, of course, family arrangements. So things are never going to be entirely smooth. But I think we do not want to see families in a worse position than they already are with the unhappiness that I've already talked about. It's right, therefore, that families should be encouraged to make their own maintenance arrangements. But what the government can be doing, and what I would like to hear from my honourable friend the Minister, is how we can be better at getting assessments right in the first place, and then enforcing arrangements when they go wrong, and how we can best help families to resolve these issues themselves. As I've already hinted at, it would be a terrible legacy if, having recognised all the problems I have highlighted above, we were to address those but create new instabilities in the new system. I look forward to hearing from the Minister how lessons have been learnt, and how the system is going to avoid the situation, which is where I started my speech, where half of children living in separated families in this country have no financial maintenance support in place. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.